Hi all, today I'm going to show you how I went about making this particle rising transition sound. Using nothing more than this small bag of crochet hooks that I found here. Initially when I first picked up the bag, I heard a cinematic sound similar to that of glass falling in slow motion. And although my sound effects took a slightly different direction, I think you can hear the similarities between the two here. Before we get into this video though, I just want to ask you guys to consider leaving a like and even subscribing to my channel to help me in creating future videos for you guys. It really would mean a lot to me. So first things first, the recording. To capture the source recording, I close mic'd the crochet hook bag with my ME66 shotgun microphone and ended up rotating it in my hands like this. The ME66 is running directly into my Scala 18i8 and is recorded at 24-bit 192 kHz. I went for a high sample rate just to make sure that I don't run into any unwanted artifacts later when it comes to pitch shifting this sound up or down. I just want to point out that I'm going to release a sound pack based on today's video, and that'll be available to download through my website. A link to that will be in the description below. The pack will contain both the original source recording, so you can mess around with this in the same way that I have today, as well as a few examples of some of the processed sounds that I made following this experiment. So, once the recording was done, I quickly cleaned it up with RX7's noise removal before jumping back into Logic to begin the processing. Once there, I applied an EQ cut to everything below 900 Hz, as I know everything in the low end of this recording was not what I was looking for. I then applied some slight reverb with cuts to the low and high end so as not to muddy or harshen things too much, and I also added some delay to multiply the number of tiny transients and to beef everything up in general. I then bounced the sound down to commit these effects, as I knew at this point I was going to need to create multiple layers in order to get the depth I wanted for my final sound. The most crucial step here was to reverse the sound and then pitch it down. In this case, I pitched it down by about half, and so far I had this. Next, I decided to cut even more with EQ, leaving this layer as just the high frequency content. I then applied some medium strength compression in order to level things out and to allow me to boost everything to a reasonable volume overall. I then began shaping the envelope of the layer using Logic's Gain plugin and some automation to bring the sound in gradually before having it end abruptly, much like any typical rising transition sound effect. After some tweaking and picking a good spot in the recording to use as the peak, I then decided to add some subtle width using the free plugin Hysteresis. A link to that will be left in the description below. I simply loaded one of my favourite patches, reduced the feedback to shorten the effect, and brought the dry wet right down to keep it minimal. Next up was some additional reverb and further tweaking of the automation, leaving us with this so far. I then narrowed the frequency range of this sound even further, as I wasn't 100% happy with the way it was sounding. Next, I decided to drop in an impact thud sound effect from one of my own sample packs. There was no reasoning to this, it just felt like the right thing to do, and this led me to applying some sidechain compression on the layer so that it briefly drops in intensity as the thud hits, before re-emerging to form a sort of tail after the impact itself. Next then, I went back to the original recording to create a new second layer. With this second layer, I applied two different delays in order to thicken up the number of tiny transients once again before bouncing down and reversing this new region. I then trimmed this audio file down and lined it up with the first layer's gain automation. I then decided to add some subtle noise to sit beneath and rise up under the first two layers of audio, For this, I used a simple synth to generate noise, created a MIDI region to trigger the noise, and applied some EQ and reverb before finally automating the gain to have it rise up in sync with the particle sounds. After some tweaking, this was the result so far. I then decided to create 2 additional layers of the recording with the intention of editing them to sound much more dry than the previous layers. I still applied delay prior to the bouncing down and reversing the layer, but did not apply any reverb or delay after the reverse, so this time the layer just stops dead with no tail out. The second version of this dry layer was cut from a different section in the recording and arranged to match the first. Both were then panned left and right to increase the stereo width. I did at this point experiment with modulating a bit crushed effect, but this was later ditched. I think it's good to adopt a trial and error approach to sound design, as you can surprise yourself sometimes, but in this case the effect just wasn't in keeping with what I was aiming for. Following some level adjustment and the drawing in of gain automation to fade in these new layers, I then went in search of a good impact sound from the original recording of the bag of crochet hooks. My intention here was to layer the sound of me dropping the bag on my desk with the cinematic impact sound effect from my other sample pack to give the overall impact more of an edge. Once I had what I was looking for, I arranged it over the cinematic impact and began processing it. This involved pitch shifting the sound down to make it appear larger, and then EQing out the unwanted low end as the base of the impact was already being provided by the cinematic impact sample. 2 different reverbs were then applied to this layer. The first had a fairly short decay and was acting as more of a dimension expander than a typical reverb. The second reverb then provided a large tail for the sounds, as you can hear. I then added a compressor, which was side-chained to the cinematic impact sample. This meant that as the base of the impact is heard, the high-end tail is quickly attenuated, giving the impression of a powerful and distorting overall impact. Finally, with this layer, I added a mono tremolo effect to add movement to the tail as it re-emerges post-sidechain compression. I edited this effect to become more prevalent over time by automating the depth parameter of Logic's stock tremolo. The final step to this sound was to then add some compression via both Logic's stock compressor and the OTT. It's another free plugin which I'll link below for you. And after all of that, this is the final sound effect. As I said at the start, both the source recording used in this video, along with a few processed particle transition sound effects, are available to download from my website. With these, you can either have a go at sound designing yourself, or just drop one of the sound effects straight into your project. They are all royalty-free and they only require a credit to me if you use them. Details on all of that can be found within the packs themselves once you've downloaded them. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and that it helps you in some way. I'd be grateful if you left a comment letting me know what you thought of this sound design, and if you subscribe to my channel, then you'll be amongst the first to know about my future sound design videos. For now though, I'll leave it there. Have fun, and I'll see you in the next video.